Hello, and welcome to another episode of Nick Hart's Art with me, Nick Hartman, and today I will be talking to you about the wet on wet style made famous by Bob Ross and one of his teachers, William Alexander, somebody not a lot of people know about, and admittedly I didn't even know about for all that long. Now, like everything, it does take practice to make extraordinarily beautiful paintings. You're not going to be a Van Gogh right off the start, but that doesn't mean progression will be slow. Take, for example, here's my first painting. Not very good. But at the same time, I still like it. And that doesn't mean you have to, just because it's not good, doesn't mean you have to dislike your painting. You can still like certain aspects of it. Now, take a look at my 20th painting. As you can see, drastic change and improvement. Progression, not necessarily slow. And I continue to strive to want to do better than even this one. I'm happy with this painting, but I'm still not satisfied. I know I can do better, and I will do better. But now that we've kind of covered that, let's go ahead and get into some more of the specifics. For the bare minimum of supplies that you're going to need. Again, this is bare minimum. You can add more. Bob Ross uses more. But you will be able to get by with this bare minimum. Paints, obviously. But you're going to need paint thinner, also pretty obvious, and a container for it. The container I use has a little screen in it to kind of help rub off the pigments in the oil. And then you're going to need a liquid medium. You're going to always hear Bob Ross talk about liquid white, or liquid clear, or liquid black. Now, granted, he's referring to his product. Technically, he didn't invent it. But, technically, he didn't invent it. But yeah, you're going to need liquid white or some linseed oil on there. Now, if you want to go the liquid white route, you don't have to buy the Bob Ross liquid white. You can make your own with titanium white and linseed oil. I have seen some people suggest just using paint thinner in titanium white, but I don't like that. You're going to get a lot better results using linseed oil and titanium white. It's going to retain more of its natural sheen or shininess to it, whereas if you use the paint thinner in titanium white, your end result is going to be more sunken in and a flat colored look to it, to which I prefer a little bit more of the shininess, not a word, the sheen to it. Past that, you need a 1-inch brush, palette knife, and then a sturdy easel. Not easel, all easels are made equally. You want a sturdy one that's gonna stand up to a little bit of a beating. And then as well, you do want a large palette. You don't want a super tiny one, say like this guy. You want a large palette. You need a good mixing area. Now again, that's just the bare minimum. You can use more. Moving further, probably the most important thing to the wet on wet technique is the paint. Now, obviously you can't paint without paint, but that is not at all what I mean. The paint consistency is what I'm referring to. Too many videos I've seen, or people making comments about how it's a nightmare to try and paint in the wet on wet style, and that it doesn't work or it's just too difficult, and this is just not really true if you set yourself up right, and that would be your paint. Very few paints come ready out of the tube to paint in this style. Typically it's going to be either very expensive paints that kind of have the right consistency, or specifically the Bob Ross paints. They're going to have the right consistency. You can definitely use those straight from the tube and get going. However, you don't have to buy those paints. I'm not advertising for anybody. What you can do is you can buy any set of oil paints and do this painting style, but you got to do one extra step before you apply any paint, which would be to firm it up. You got to firm up your paint. And to do so, you can either put your paints on your palette and just leave it overnight and come in the morning, start painting, should be good to go. Or you can take your paints, put it on a piece of cardboard and let it sit for about 20-40 minutes. You don't want to go much longer, and you definitely want to kind of keep your eye on it, otherwise you'll lose all of that oil in the paint. So keep your eye on it. And if you happen to go a little too firm, pulled out too much oil, you should be able to add some linseed oil and kind of rejuvenate some life back into it. But again, firm, name of the game. You got to have firm paint to start with to do a good, successful painting in this style and not have headaches to actually enjoy it. Once you're getting close to getting started, say if you're priming your canvases yourself or applying a gesso for like a black canvas, that's cool, that's good. Nothing, I prefer, I enjoy black canvases probably actually the most so far. However, I suggest keeping a separate brush for this. Water can destroy brushes, and you can't clean your gesso off in the paint thinner. It doesn't clean like that, unfortunately. So, about the only way I know, really, is to clean the acrylic off in soap and water. But that can be very detrimental to brushes. Take a look at this guy right here. Bristles fly, pushed all over out of the place. Not a pretty sight for a brush you want to do a beautiful painting with. Whereas this would be one of my good brushes. Look at the vast difference. Holds its shape. It's only been in paint thinner. I've actually even almost destroyed one of my good brushes trying to clean it in water, and ended up having to use a bunch of brush conditioner to get it back to its shape, and it just was not worth it at all. It was a massive headache, and I was worried that I seriously destroyed one of my good brushes. If you are going to use brush conditioner, use very little. Way too easy to get carried away with that stuff, and it'll stick in your brush and harden it, and it's a pain in the butt to try and get out, so use very little. Now next, when applying your liquid medium, whether it's liquid white or linseed oil, you want to apply as little as possible. You don't want to put very much on there. If you put too much on, it's gonna make your layering progress much harder. And simply all you have to do is just, once you applied it, just wipe it off with a cloth, and whatever's left will be the perfect amount. As for applying methods, if you're going to use linseed oil, I suggest just applying with a cloth. Wipe it on there, wipe any excess off. Liquid white, well, again, whether it's your own formula or the Bob Ross liquid white, just go ahead and apply that with a brush and wipe off any excess, and you're set to go. As far as putting paints on your palette, I suggest putting on a little bit and then just adding as you go to eliminate having lots of paint left on your palette once you're finished. And I'm not knowledgeable on a great way to store paints when you're finished, as well as I don't even want to concern myself too much with that, because I feel like if I try to save my paints when I'm done painting from the palette, that it'll put me on a time frame and to do my next painting. But I gotta do my next painting super quick, and I need some time to work out my personal process, and putting a time frame on that just it's not fun for me. It kind of ruins it. And as you're going, if you haven't noticed so far, part of the major theme of our paints is thick, thick, thick. You want to keep your layers as thick as possible, or, well, not thick physically, but consistency-wise, firmness. You want to keep your paints as firm as possible for as long as possible. You should be able to get your first several, maybe not several, but your first multiple layers on without thinning at all, and then as you progressively need to thin, start small. You can always add more. You can't really just take paint thinner out of it. So if you do happen to accidentally add too much paint thinner, save that pile for later, start a new one, because you will waste way too much time and way too much paint trying to thicken that pile up. Just start a new one, do what you needed to, save the other pile for later when you do need paint of a much thinner consistency. And then lastly, if as you're going and you are quite a few layers deep and you're starting to run into trouble of it's not sticking, it's mushing, it's just kind of mixing mud on the paint and you can't get really any thinner, or it just blobs on there because you're too thin now, it's okay, don't worry. All you need to do, stop, figure out a way to save whatever paint you have on your palette, come back the next day, and then paint. The paint that's on the canvas will have had enough time to firm up some, and you'll be able to add new layers without being crazy thin on your paints. And you'll be able to then apply the brush without just getting giant blobs. So never feel like you can't take a break. I mean, that's the great thing about oil paints, is that it's very slow drying. I mean, it can take even up to 1 week before a painting is even touch dry. Which also, another tip, just because your painting is touch dry does not mean it is dry. Oil paints can take even up to 6 months to finish drying. But that's going to be all for today's episode. Hopefully you found some useful information or just kind of enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. We'd greatly appreciate it. If you want to see some more future content, hit the subscribe button. Our next video is going to be a mountain challenge. I'm going to take one of my old canvases that I kind of discarded off to the side because I wasn't happy with it, and we're going to just fill it up with mountains. We're going to basically be using the pilot knife only and just make a giant mountain range. I mean, we'll use one of the either the 1-inch or the 2-inch brush to help create some effects as we're going, but 90% will be with the knife. So stay tuned for that. That one's going to be a fun one. It really is. But until next time, goodbye.